It began with laughter, loud, uncontrollable laughter, the kind that left viewers breathless, clutching their sides, and wondering how something so chaotic could be so brilliant. But behind the slammed doors, the shouting matches, and the perfectly timed disasters, there is something else hiding in plain sight, something uncomfortable, something controversial, and eventually, something that would spark debates lasting decades. Because Fawlty Towers wasn't just a comedy, it was a ticking time bomb disguised as a sitcom. And when it finally exploded, no one, not the audience, not the network, not even its creators, could fully control the fallout. To understand how it all began, you have to step inside a real hotel. Not a fictional one, not a carefully crafted set, but a real, uncomfortable, almost unbelievable place where the line between comedy and reality didn't just blur, it disappeared entirely. It was the early 1970s when a young comedy troupe arrived in the quiet seaside town of Torquay. They were there for work, expecting nothing more than a simple stay in a modest hotel. Instead, they walked into a nightmare of hospitality so bizarre, so surreal, that it felt like a performance. The man running the hotel was Donald Sinclair, and he didn't behave like someone who welcomed guests. He treated them like intruders. One moment, he was glaring suspiciously at visitors as if they had something to hide. The next, he was scolding them over trivial details that most people wouldn't even notice. When one guest accidentally left a briefcase unattended, Sinclair didn't calmly investigate. He didn't ask questions. He simply grabbed it and threw it over a wall, convinced it might explode. The guests weren't sure whether to laugh or leave. But one man was watching closely. That man was John Cleese. And what he saw wasn't just bad service. It was inspiration. Cleese saw something extraordinary hidden inside the madness. A character. A man so desperate to appear sophisticated, so completely unfit for his role, that he became unintentionally hilarious. Sinclair wasn't trying to be funny. That was the magic. He was serious. Dead serious. And that seriousness made him absurd. Cleese began to imagine what would happen if someone like Sinclair ran a fictional hotel. What disasters would unfold? How many lives would he frustrate? How many situations would spiral completely out of control? From that simple question, one of television's most unforgettable characters was born, Basil Fawlty. But Basil didn't emerge overnight. He was the product of years of observation, frustration, and creative evolution. And to truly understand Basil, you have to understand the man who created him. Long before he became a comedy legend, Cleese was just a tall, awkward boy growing up in a quiet English town. He stood out, not because he tried to, but because he couldn't help it. His height alone made him impossible to ignore. But inside, he was observant, curious, constantly studying the strange behaviors of the world around him. He was fascinated by authority figures, not because he admired them, but because he saw their flaws, their insecurities, their quiet desperation to appear important. These observations stayed with him. Eventually, Cleese found himself at Downing College, Cambridge, where his future would change forever. It was there that he joined a student comedy group. There, he discovered that his awkwardness wasn't a weakness. It was a weapon. He met collaborators who shared his strange vision of humor. Together, they pushed boundaries. They rejected traditional punchlines. They embraced chaos. This group would later become known as Monty Python. But even as Cleese found success, something deeper was forming in his mind. A character built on frustration, on insecurity, on the quiet rage of a man who wanted respect but never truly earned it. That character would eventually find his home in a small, struggling hotel. Cleese didn't create the show alone. Beside him was Connie Booth, his creative partner and wife at the time. Together, they crafted a world that felt painfully real. They didn't want easy jokes. They wanted tension. They wanted situations where every decision made things worse. They wanted viewers to feel the discomfort, the anxiety, and the inevitable collapse. When the show first aired, the reaction was uncertain. Some critics didn't understand it. They saw chaos where others saw brilliance. They saw anger where others saw comedy. They questioned whether audiences would accept such an unlikable central character. But audiences didn't just accept Basil Fawlty. They recognized him. They saw his insecurity, his desperation to impress wealthy guests while resenting them at the same time, his constant failures disguised as confidence. And they laughed. They laughed because Basil wasn't just funny. He was human. The hotel became a pressure cooker. Every episode added more tension. Every mistake pushed Basil closer to collapse. And watching him unravel became irresistible. Standing beside him was his sharp, unflinching wife, played by Prunella Scales. She saw through Basil completely. Where he was emotional, she was calm. Where he was chaotic, she was controlled. And then there was Manuel, the endlessly confused waiter portrayed by Andrew Sachs. His misunderstandings didn't just complicate situations, they detonated them. Together, they formed a perfect storm. But while audiences were laughing, tension was building elsewhere. Because one episode would change everything. It was titled The Germans. At first glance, it seemed like another farcical disaster. Basil, recovering from a concussion, struggled to manage his hotel while welcoming German guests. Determined not to offend them, he gave himself one simple instruction: do not mention the war. But Basil was Basil. The harder he tried to avoid the subject, the more he stumbled directly into it. His words became more erratic, his behavior more desperate, until finally, in a moment that would become legendary, he marched across the room in a grotesque imitation of Adolf Hitler. Some viewers laughed. Others were horrified. Letters poured in. Complaints flooded the network. People accused the show of crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. Executives debated whether the episode should be banned. For the first time, the future of the show felt uncertain. Cleese defended the episode fiercely. He argued that the joke was never aimed at the German guests. The joke was Basil himself, his ignorance, his arrogance, his complete lack of self-awareness. Basil wasn't the hero. He was the warning. And yet, the controversy refused to fade. Years later, the episode would face new scrutiny. As cultural standards shifted, streaming platforms removed or edited it. New generations viewed it through different lenses. The debate reignited. Was it satire, or was it offensive? The answer depended entirely on who was watching. But controversy wasn't the only struggle happening behind the scenes. While Basil's fictional marriage was crumbling on screen, Cleese's real marriage to Booth was quietly falling apart off-screen. They separated during production of the later episodes. Yet somehow, their creative partnership remained intact. They continued writing, continued performing, continued building something timeless, even as their personal relationship ended. It was a strange contradiction, pain fueling brilliance. And then, almost as suddenly as it began, it ended. Only 12 episodes were ever made. 12 episodes. That was all it took. In a television landscape filled with long-running shows, it seemed impossible that something so brief could leave such a permanent mark. But it did. Over time, critics who once doubted the show began to reconsider. They recognized its precision, its boldness, its willingness to make audiences uncomfortable. Eventually, the British Film Institute named it the greatest British television series ever made. Not one of the greatest. Its influence spread across generations. Writers studied its structure. Actors admired its performances. Audiences continued discovering it, laughing just as hard as viewers had decades earlier. But time didn't stand still for the people who created it. Cleese continued working, expanding his career into films, voice acting, and new creative ventures. Yet Basil Fawlty never truly left him. The character remained part of his identity. Booth chose a different path, stepping away from entertainment entirely. Scales faced personal health challenges, but remained beloved. Sachs continued acting until his later years, carrying Manuel's legacy with him. And the show itself lived on. Not frozen in time, but alive, debated, analyzed, celebrated. Because beneath the laughter, beneath the chaos, beneath the controversy, there is something deeper. Truth. Truth about insecurity. Truth about pride. Truth about the fragile illusion of control. Basil Fawlty believed he was running a respectable hotel. In reality, he was barely holding himself together. And maybe that's why audiences never stop watching. Because in Basil's failures, they saw something familiar. They saw the fear of embarrassment, the desire to be respected, the struggle to maintain dignity while everything falls apart. And in that struggle, they found comedy. Not safe comedy, not comfortable comedy, but honest comedy. Comedy that risked defending. Comedy that refused to play it safe. Comedy that survived long after the final episode aired. Today, decades later, the doors of that fictional hotel remain open. New viewers continue to walk inside. They hear the shouting. They witness the disasters. They meet the man who tried so hard to be impressive and failed so spectacularly. And they laugh. Because some stories never truly end. They simply wait for the next person to discover them. And somewhere in the echo of slammed doors and frustrated sighs, Basil Fawlty is still standing behind that reception desk, still pretending he's in control, still proving that the most unforgettable legends are often born from the most unexpected disasters.